Chapter 21 Using Weird Skills with the Hammer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The only question that kept flashing inside her mind was that if this was the secret William mentioned before or he still had more to astonish her. Soon she got the answer. William worked diligently like this for an entire hour. After exhausting most of the homo's clay, he finally managed to cover up the 7 kilos of the scarlet vibrant ores. One task is done, more to come. As he placed aside the last batch of handled ores, he muttered to himself before stretching out his body. Despite raising his spirit power to 30.5 points, he still was considered weak. In the next task, he had to use the hammer in forging, and he had to do it in a tedious way. But that didn't stop him. As William picked the hammer here, he found it slightly heavy. The hammer wasn't made of any special alloy, but its weight was at least more than 5 kilos. Raising it with one hand made him feel a little strain over his muscles. But he had to not only hold it with one hand, but he needed to keep moving it for a long time. Need a hand here. At this point, Alina's earlier impression about William changed drastically for the better. Just the show he put earlier was enough to consider him a forging genius. Her past harsh attitude vanished and was replaced with a gentler one. Besides, she wanted to know more about him. So, helping him here was the best way to get what she wanted later on. No need, but thanks, William simply refused before taking one normal vibrant ore from the 3 kilos stash and took a deep breath. Careful with that, Alina shouted in fear. If she was previously saying such a warning out of her kind and pure soul, she was now honestly and sincerely concerned about William's safety. If something wrong happened to him, she would lose a genius forging disciple. She wouldn't allow this to happen. Instantly she gushed out spirit power outside her body, preparing herself to intervene with all her might if things went wrong. Thick pure golden energy appeared enveloping her body, giving her a holy appearance. William just gave her a mere glance, feeling surprised that she was a gold-grade spirit master, so close to becoming a dark gold spirit master. One had to know most of the forging spirit masters were at silver grade. Gold and above ranks were considered experts in this world. He knew she was a strong master before, but he never expected her to be this strong. Spirit masters learning other professions like forging and alchemy had to spend a lot of time on these professions. That meant they would pay less attention and pour less effort in raising their spirit power. So, if silver spirit masters were considered common, in such a secondary profession world, they were considered elites. Alina expected the ore in William's hands to explode. After all, from his stance, she knew he was trying to forge it directly using the hammer and his spirit power. If he didn't use the hammer and instead threw the ore inside the fire, even if it was inside that melting pot, then this would cause the berserk energy inside that little piece of ore to violently explode. But what William did next didn't only startle her, but it even made her freeze out of pure shock. Clang! William didn't intend to do such a suicidal act as she expected. Standing in his place, he simply threw the ore high in the air as if he was playing with a ball or something, before starting to rotate himself while holding the hammer. The hammer was heavy, so he simply raised it horizontally and let its weight drive his body in rotation. He exerted little strength at first to start the rotation, but later on his body was literally dragged by the hammer. In a span of a few seconds, his speed escalated to a terrifying degree, even creating images while rotating. The piece of ore he threw high lost its driving force and started to free fall. Just when it reached the level of his hammer, William acted. He simply let the hammer hit the ore. Under normal circumstances, the ore wouldn't sustain the heavy force of the hammer and would either crash and explode or be thrown far away and explode. But neither happened. The moment the hammer touched the ore, William delicately adjusted the hammer to slide over one of its surfaces and not directly smash into it. As the hammer glided over the ore, it continued to rotate afterwards like nothing happened. In return, it lost little of its driving force, something William easily countered by exerting little force during the next rotation. But the astonishing part wasn't in that subtle, yet complicated move. but in what happened to the ore itself. Logically speaking, even if William managed to avoid clashing directly with the ore piece would drop to the ground under gravity. However, under the watchful shocking gazes of Alina, the ore stood in its place motionless as if it was held by an invisible hand. And just in a blink of an eye, the hammer completed one circle and returned to hit the ore again, and again for continuous 5 minutes. What is he trying to do? Eline could now swear that the skills William showed weren't simple. She totally believed what he said earlier. And seeing such weird skills that she never saw or heard about before made her quite sure that he had some sort of a mysterious master behind his back. But soon enough she knew the answer to her puzzlement about William's actions. As the hammer kept slamming in such a genius way at the ore, the size of the ore started to get smaller. One piece of ore was in the size of a closed fist. But after 5 minutes of continuous hammering and tapering, it became the size of a finger, even looking like one of the thin fingers of William. Phew, at this point, William suddenly stopped and couldn't help but rotate a couple of times freely as he deliberately controlled the speed of his body and forced the hammer to gradually stop. But he was drenched in sweat, panting heavily in racing breaths, while his face looked slightly pale. Thud, as the hitting force vanished, that final piece of ore finally lost its invisible force holding it midair and fell on the ground in a muffled voice under the petrified gazes of Alina. Chapter 22 A Harsh Master. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This. Just seeing the state William ended up at gave Alina a big scare. She instantly cancelled her useless shield and appeared next to his side, supporting his body with her strong arm. Thanks. William was so tired to speak properly at this moment. During the past 5 minutes, he truly went overboard and pushed his body beyond its limits. Here, Alina took out a yellow bottle and handed it over to William. This is the spirit breath, one of the best potions in recovering one's spirit and cleanse fatigue. Thanks, William couldn't refuse such a precious thing from her. As far as he knew, the price of such a bottle was at least 10,000 spirit crystals. And it was even smaller than this one. Just taking a sip of that potion made him feel instantly refreshed. Few drops were enough to restore his exhausted strength. After all, William was still a weak spirit master to begin with. Besides, William didn't want to deplete all this precious potion in one go. He intended to keep a few drops left for his future adventure. I have to admit, Alina honestly said, that master of yours is really a genius. But she is also a harsh one. William wanted to bitterly laugh, but he controlled himself. If this was considered harsh, then what Alina would call the inhuman training of his master back then. Thanks for this, William said in honest gratitude while motioning towards the potion she gifted him with. It's nothing, I just want to see what you will do in the end. Alina waved her hand before she stood on the side and didn't move. This potion might seem priceless to someone like William, but to Alina it was indeed nothing. Won't you get back there? William pointed at the spot where Alina stood before. But Alina shook her head. I'm now trusting what you said. You won't throw your life simply like that, she firmly said while her main goal was to be closer and attentively watch the innovative things that William was doing here. She didn't want to miss a single thing he did, and from this experience she might even try and replicate everything later on. William already saw through her intentions, but he didn't stop her. She already vowed to keep the secrets she saw here to herself. Besides, she already paid enough price to get such a privilege using this potion. As his strength replenished, he returned to repeat the same process again and again. The drawbacks of this method weren't only limited to the exhaustion it brought to his body, but also the time it consumed. William was only able to deal with a single or once every 5 minutes. He also needed at least a couple of minutes to consume few drops of the potion and rest. With the presence of the breath of spirit potion, he got a little courageous and exerted more force and got this time shortened by half. But it wasn't enough. He took over 15 hours to finish this hard task. During this time, the sky outside dimmed, and night fell, but neither did he stop, nor Alina left. She kept watching his moves without even blinking during the first hour. The more she watched, the more she admired William and his mysterious master. So, he is using the percussion caused by the hammer to eliminate the impurities off. Using vibrations to cleanse such berserk ores without triggering the energy inside. Brilliant. Why didn't I think about using the same method before? She kept thinking about giving it a try and using the same way to cleanse the vibrant ores. However, when she thought about being inexperienced in such moves, she refrained from doing so. And like that she decided to continue watching and learning, mimicking William's actions in her mind to better engrave them to her memory. In time she got hungry, she sent for a disciple to bring a fancy meal that would be enough for 5 people. William refused to eat until he finished this task. He was absorbed in the process. He feared losing his focus if he stopped. So, he pushed himself and kept going. His fatigue was already cleansed away by the potion. His strength was restored as well. But his body still needed to eat, and his mind couldn't recover from the mental exhaustion of constantly focusing like his body. Just a few hours before he stopped, his stomach started to ache and make weird sounds from time to time. As for his mind, he felt an annoying headache, like his head got opened by a brutal axe or something. Phew, I'm done. As he finally cleansed the last piece, he stopped and drank a few drops to replenish his strength. When he noticed the darkness outside, he couldn't help but feel a little weird. Just now he realized that Alina stayed all this time by his side without moving an inch. This meant she remained here for over 15 hours. Doesn't she have anything else to do or what? William thought to himself before Alina pointed at a new wooden table that her disciple brought. Come, let's eat. Thanks. Once he saw the food, all the hunger he had suppressed exploded without control. Without acting polite, he went and sat on the opposite side of Alina before gulping food like a monster. Ha ha ha, easy, or you'll get yourself choked, ha ha ha. Seeing him like that made Alina's mood better. Just as this moment William returned to the little 8-year-old kid, and that mysterious air he emitted during his forging process vanished without a trace. Alina might have bought the story of the mysterious master, but who said reading a book was enough to become an expert? One had to be talented, and that wasn't enough. Constant training over these skills and techniques was also required. So even if William had a formidable master like he claimed, then that master also had a scary disciple to execute such skills in such precision. I can't believe you are only 8 years old. After asking about his age, Alina couldn't help but express her surprise. I see you are a porter. Why not quit this useless job and join us here? In her eyes such talent would be left to dust and be wasted if William continued to be a porter. William didn't stop eating while answering her with full mouth. I will, but not now. Why? William kept eating as he felt his headache and hunger were cleansed clean with food. It's my master's wish. William shrugged and put a helpless look on his face as if this was out of his ability to decide. Sigh, that master of yours. I can't criticize her, but her methods are really strange. Alina couldn't believe that a master would force her disciple to work in such a low job when he could shine and live a life of kings in the forging department. But if William surprised her for his abilities, then she was sure his master must be something else. How could she say anything about such a master's teachings? Chapter 23 Striking a great deal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Can you tell me your master's name at least? After so many failed attempts in prying over the identity of William's mysterious master and her current whereabouts, Alina couldn't help but ask about this question. If she knew the name, she could start digging more information about that master and might even get lucky and know her whereabouts. She wanted nothing more right now but to go and meet such a legendary master. If her disciple, one who lived in the academy as a porter, was showing such awesome tricks and skills, then Alina could only imagine what William's master was like. I can't say anything without her permission, but William didn't even budge. You know she is my master and I have to follow everything she says. Keeping herself this hidden is a miracle in itself. Alina sighed. I can't believe such an outstanding master is present in the same world I live in without knowing about her. She never ceased trying to guess that master's identity. But from all the famous and renowned names she knew about, none matched the identity of William's master. She wasn't only a mysterious master in her way of forging, but she seemed to seclude herself away from any known force in the spirit master world. Besides her unusual ways in forging, if such a person was known in this world, then she would be famous for her bizarre techniques. And yet, she had not even a single name to fit such criteria. If anyone else told her about this, she might question the integrity of the story rather than believing it. But she was the one who saw everything and witnessed how William dealt with the Scarlet Vibrant or using new skills. Then can you tell me more about the things you've done here? After William finished eating, nearly sweeping half of the rich meal, she had the courage to ask. May I ask about the reason? William didn't hurry to refuse her request. After all, he might get something useful like that potion in return from this. I think that clay method can be used with other ores, right? Alina didn't hide her own thoughts. When William didn't comment, she continued, if we used the thunderous lick ores for example instead of the scarlet vibrant ores, we could craft brutal weapons that can kill dark gold monsters even. She seemed excited, and William understood the reason behind that. That might work in theory, but not practically, he slowly said. Such berserk ore is hard to control using this clay. Why? She forgot that she was speaking with an 8-year-old kid and a porter. She then started a long session of discussion like she was talking to one of her colleague masters in the forging department. William didn't limit his answers to just yes and no. He started to slowly explain a simple concept known in the outside world, the energy capacity concept. Homo's clay had a good control ability, but its innate power limited its usages. When he slowly explained this to her, she started to gain insights into a totally brand new world. If you are this curious, then I can ask my master to write a few ways to control some hard-to-forge ores to get better benefits from them, William finally threw in his piece, but that will come at a price, of course. Anything is negotiable, Alina didn't even hesitate to agree, anything she wants will be agreed upon by me acting as a guarantee. She wasn't overstepping over her boundaries here. She was sure any other forging master would agree if he was in her spot. It's not a big deal, William casually said, in addition to that, I can bring many manuals about how to forge new alloys and such to make outstanding gears. Yet, the things made out of my master's methods and instructions will be sold at a high price. Of course, after cutting away the initial cost of the materials, my master will ask for 50% share of any profit. This. Alina paused and William mistook her silence for refusal. You have to know the value of such methods aren't only in the price of the final gears, but in the renovative way of thinking itself, William slowly said, explaining in deep meaning why he asked for 50%. It's not that, it's just the price seems a bit low. Alina knew from a profitable point of view, this might be a good deal to not turn down. However, her eyes weren't on this deal, but on the master shrouding in mystery behind William. What about this? Your master will take 50% of any item price, no need to consider the material cost in this. She decided to give a profitable deal to William so she would build a strong relationship with his master. Deal. No matter what she planned, William would be a fool if he turned down such a deal. I'm going to meet my master soon anyway. After I return, I'll hand over the techniques if the master agrees. Despite there being no master and he was the owner of everything, William decided to do things this way. Who knew, people had different hearts after all. Alina might be a good person, but if another one with a darker mind and twisted soul found out about that, he might face problems he couldn't deal with. He had to put his master in the front as a kind of protection, even if that meant he had to waste time in return. Alright, how long will you be away? Alina was feeling excited from striking this deal. If not for William's need to finish his final product, she would have left and gone to the headmaster of the forging department and shared the news with him. Almost a week, William couldn't give an exact answer. After all, his return was linked to his spirit power upgrading plans. A week isn't that long. Alina heaved a sigh of relief before she realized something but didn't express it in words. If William needed a week to visit his master and be back, then his master must be living nearby. She decided to keep such a note to herself and try to find a way to search for that master personally. If not fearing for creating misunderstanding, she would rather tag along and track William's steps during this trip. May I ask what you are doing? As William finished the deal, he stood up in a fresh state and started to work again. Alina stood by his side while watching him arranging the first dim ores he handled. I'm building arrowheads. He gestured with his head towards the mold she produced in a way as if he was saying. Isn't it obvious? I mean, what do you plan to do with this ore? Alina rolled up her eyes in a funny way. If not for her tough features, she would look pretty by doing so. Chapter 24 Forging Arrowheads. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You'll soon be able to see for yourself. William finished putting the dimmed ores on the table before he went ahead and did something different. Unlike what Alina expected, William didn't place the ores on fire but another thing. These candles. She muttered while watching William liquefying the candles. It didn't take much time before 3 pots were filled with melted green liquid, shining brightly the entire room at such late hours in the night. Do you want light during work? I have a higher grade candle here. She took out a much bigger, a lot thicker, and deep green candle of light from her storage ring. No, I'm using it in the forging process. William brought another pot and filled it this time with the dimmed scarlet ores. Once placed on fire, Alina couldn't help but call out her spirit power in fright. The deep fear of these ores' explosions ran deep through her bones and made her reflexively react. But nothing like what she feared happened. Just the miracle she never expected appeared there, and the ores got liquefied smoothly and without any problems. It took roughly 10 minutes to melt the entire ores into bright scarlet red fluid. William didn't hurry to start hammering it, and instead he placed that pot carefully on the ground before taking one of the 3 green fluid pots and slowly poured some into the scarlet liquid. Swoosh! A thick cloud of steam assaulted him and rose fast to fill part of the room. His face was slightly burnt by the gush of heat, and his hair looked a bit disheveled. However, that didn't prevent Alina from witnessing another miracle. The red melted vibrant ores once got in touch with the green liquid started to emit dazzling sparks of light like fireworks. It seemed there was something inside the green liquid that stimulated the melted scarlet vibrant ore. Alina didn't know what it was, but William knew. The candle of light material had an outstanding ability to augment any spirit power conducting material, just like what it did with the spirit crystals. However, this wasn't the only effect it had. It also had the ability to regulate any energy conduction. The candle of light turned the fierce-natured scarlet vibrant ores that got slightly under control using the clay material into more smooth and obedient ones. It was like a second calming bonus added to the scarlet vibrant ores to prevent them from going berserk under any condition. Doing this ensured the further forging process of these ores safely without any unforeseen accident. Within the thick cloud of red mist, William reopened his wound and let his blood fall over the mix. He didn't wait for the mist to clear as he placed the pot aside to cool off and grabbed another one. During the next hour he kept doing that until he finished melting everything he had. The number of light candles needed wasn't that much. Out of the number he bought before, he was left with almost half of it. Time to temper it. He returned one pot to the fire and carefully waited for 5 minutes. He didn't want the mix to become liquid, but in semi-solid form. Then he took it out, poured it over the anvil before starting to hammer it. He didn't have enough strength to hammer it properly and efficiently, so he used the same method as before. Rotating for a few times before finally landing the hammer down was enough to cleanse the semi-solid mix and release sparks of fire all around while burning impurities. Despite it being a simple hammering process, William didn't have enough strength or spirit power to use the hammer efficiently in doing so. And soon enough Alina noticed this. Let me do it for you. At this point, Alina knew this was William's weakness. He had such a fragile body and that would limit the amount of cleansing he could do. Thanks, knowing his limits, William didn't refuse the help. He stood on the side while preparing other pots for her. And Alina started to show her position as one of the top 5 forging masters in the entire academy. Clang, 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 asterisk each hit was done with all her strength, making even the entire room tremble under her fierce hammering. William looked in envy towards her and couldn't help but aspire to get such strength and more. It's ready. After hammering, cooling, reheating and repeating the process for a dozen times, the earlier scarlet bright mix with a few lines of green changed to become silver in color. Such change was bizarre in Alina's eyes, but it was expected for William. After all, the real color of the scarlet vibrant ore's essence wasn't scarlet red, but silver. All that red was the impurities which invaded the ores from other minerals and soil. The first piece to be ready was left again inside the fire before it turned totally into fluid. Alina didn't continue working and William knew the reason behind that. She wanted to witness his last moves before returning to work on the remaining scarlet ores. Do you want special water for cooling? She didn't consider this as a simple forging process. In her eyes, William might be doing arrowheads, but these heads looked special to be cooled with normal water. No need, but William knew wasting such resources over these consumables wasn't a wise move. After all, the forging process went better than what he expected thanks to the timely help of Alina. Besides, using higher-grade cooling water wouldn't add any boost effect to the arrowheads. So, he calmly declined her offer. The next thing was done like any usual forging process. He poured the melted mix inside the mold and then used water from the big basin inside the room to splash it evenly on the mold to cool it off. Steam came out again, but it didn't last long this time. Asterisk clang. Asterisk clang. As he got done from forging these arrowheads, William just flipped the mold on the side and hit it with his fist. The pieces fell and the arrowheads were ready to be used. These contained such tremendous power, enough to wound silver-grade monsters. Alina examined a few arrowheads and gave out her surprised opinion. Wound. Humph, if these arrows are used properly, forget about silver monsters. They can even wound gold-grade monsters in a fatal way. As for silver ones, they would be long dead by the explosion, William said in pride without holding back his ego. After all, this was his work. How could he let Alina misjudge his arrowheads like that? Really? Alina seemed to doubt him. Can I keep some for me to test? Take whatever you want. William knew she didn't ask this out of her curiosity. She was thinking not only to mimic his brilliant forging process, but also to show such unique products to the forging high-ranked master. Or else how could she make these masters agree on the deal she promised him? Chapter 25 Gold Grade Sword. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The two kept working on the rest of the ores for hours. When the light of the next day appeared, they were about to finish. Phew, that took longer than I expected. Alina wiped the non-existent layer of sweat over her forehead while William's eyebrows twitched when he heard that. If it was him, then forget about taking hours. Even an entire day might not be enough. What are you going to do with these? She pointed at the smaller batch of the scarlet vibrant, the ones that William handled before using his hammer. Do you happen to have flying knife molds? William didn't answer her directly and instead asked for what he wanted. Flying knives. What are these? But just like he expected, such a concept was still unknown in this world. Do you have a mold we can modify? I want to do something special with these ores, William said, and Alina just produced a mold that had a few holes in it with much anticipation. She already got shocked by William's actions more than once. Hearing that he wanted to do something special about something she never heard about before made her mind run wild about ideas of what he was going to do. I was still working on this one. She pointed towards the mold she brought out of her storage ring before adding, but to modify it you'll have to use a huge amount of spirit power. Let me do it instead. Just tell me what shape you want and how many of them. William knew what she said wasn't false, but it wasn't the only way to modify the mold here. However, he didn't say anything regarding this to her and simply started to draw on the ground with his finger. 20 centimeters long, the first half of it is just like the arrow heads here but slightly thicker. The other half will be in cylindrical shape, as a handle. He described what he had in mind using words and drawing. Aren't these like knives used in cooking? But what she heard and saw made her frown. She thought he would come up with a revolutionary concept once more, but it turned out to be cooking knives. They are like these, but cooking knives have different ratios, William explained after getting over his surprise from her comment. The cooking ones had 4/5 of their length like the arrow heads, with short handles. Alright, Alina didn't see much difference in both. Yet she decided to follow William's instructions. A thick wave of bright yellow energy gushed out of her body and enveloped the mold in mere seconds. Cracking sounds erupted as the mold started to show signs of changing. Concave parts began to form while slowly taking out the shape of what he just drew on the floor and described. How many of them do you want? William looked at the pile of his purified ores and made a rough estimate in his mind. 20, he said. It's done. As the design was ready, she didn't need much time to prepare the mold. The design was the hardest thing of making any new item, and changing the mold was the easiest and fastest part of the process. The only drawback such a process had in her eyes was for the huge amount of spirit energy needed to alter such high-grade mold. William examined the mold carefully first. He had to admit to himself that she did this task brilliantly using her spirit power. Now what? She asked. Time to add the final touch. William went back and used the pots from earlier. This time the other half of his light candles left in the pots were placed again at fire. Then he put the refined scarlet vibrant or needles into 3 pots and let them melt. The candles melted faster, but he didn't hurry to take them off fire. Alina mistook this as he wanted to let them in liquid state. But after the passage of 10 minutes on fire, a new change occurred to the green liquid. After being still for long minutes, sparks of dark green fire started to dazzle the entire room. Alina never expected the candles would have another stage of purification. What she didn't know was that the candles had more than one stage of purification, 5 stages at least. But right now, William only needed the second stage of it. The first stage would burn the impurities that were basically hindering the candle material to work properly in forging. In other words, this was done when anyone would lighten up the candle. After all the light emanated from the fire was done by burning these impurities away. But the second stage would act on the fine impurities and also to concentrate the green material into a higher form. To do this, the entire candle had to be inside a pot and placed directly on fire for 10 minutes at least. This form wouldn't only help in augmenting and conducting energy, it would also add another feature, long-distance control. That was the basic concept behind flying weapons in the outside world. Right now, and with William's limited spirit power, he could only control such low-weight knives. And he could at most control 3 of them with his low spirit power. Each knife would require at least 10 spirit points to control. If he used a bigger weapon, then this consumption would soar higher. Even if he couldn't use all of them right now, he wouldn't miss this chance to produce more and store them for later. He planned to raise his spirit power above 100. By then he'd be able to control around 10 flying knives. If his spirit power grew past 200 mark, he'd be able to control all the 20 knives with ease. While waiting, he didn't stand idle. As he left the pots on fire, roughly knowing it would take around 20 to 30 minutes to get ready, he went to the logs of wood on one corner to finish another task. Do you have a sword? He asked. Mine got ruined. Don't tell me you still have that old useless scrap of metal. Alina was surprised to hear that. As a porter, he'd get the lowest grade swords. These were commonly in a very bad state, usually ending up getting broken in less than a few years at most. She weirdly eyed him in doubt. He was indeed fulfilling all the criteria of a porter. But she was bewildered as she knew how formidable the master standing behind him was. If weapons were pricey and hard to get for anyone else, for forgers it was a piece of cake. William could only bitterly smile. He planned to buy a decent sword before he dropped the issue thanks to his low wealth. He thought he would pay for getting the work done here. But if he knew Alina would be here to help, and he wouldn't even pay a single spirit crystal, then he would have bought a better sword than his old rusty and useless one. Here, just without caring, like taking out a bar of chocolate, she took out a long sword with its scabbard and threw it towards William. Isn't that a gold-grade sword? The moment he unsheathed the sword, William got an instant fright out of shock. His top dream in buying a sword would be a decent white grade or even a mediocre silver grade. This is nothing, Alina developed a wide smile over her face, consider it as a mere gift. She would never miss a chance to get closer to this kid. In her mind, she wasn't interested at all in William but in his master. Chapter 26 Leaving the Academy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thanks, William would never act polite, not when such a weapon that would cost tens of thousands of crystals was offered to him free of charge. He turned to the logs of wood and started to scatter them around. What are you looking for? Alina came to his side and asked with a curious look. I have arrowheads but no shafts, he said while picking up faint brown logs and putting them aside. These would do perfectly fine. The brown bark woods. That's a common and weak grade of wood. If you want, I can get better wood for you. William was momentarily tempted before he dropped the idea. It wasn't the issue of quality, rather he wanted something to serve his goals best. If it was another time, he would prefer to agree. But he knew if he did so, it would take much longer to check the other types of wood Alina would provide. And he already lost an entire day in his preparations and still not finished. Despite gaining a lot from coming here, he still regretted all this time wasted on making these arrows. Thanks, these will do. He gathered up 10 thick and short logs of that brown bark wood and then started to cut them using his sword. His work was diligent and precise, cutting the wood into similar cylindrical thin pieces to act as shafts. In the span of 20 minutes, he got everything ready. From the side, Alina couldn't help but feel weird about his actions. To chop wood, one would use an axe, not such a sword. But she refrained from speaking and kept watching in silence, keeping her thoughts to herself. Under the curious gazes of Alina, he took one green pot out. The former sparkling green liquid seemed to get smaller in size and brighter in light. In her eyes, it looked like pure water, and the normal candle material became like mud. Sizzle, without waiting he poured the liquid over the shafts he prepared. They emitted loud sizzling noises before the shafts absorbed all of it. Not a single drop even fell over the ground. William didn't just want to have long-distance control over the arrows he made. Even if his control over the arrows wasn't as perfect as the flying knives, such trick would come handy at desperate moments. Those faint brown shafts changed color and showed a tinge of green. One pot wasn't enough, so he had to bring another before he was all done. Around 1,000 shafts were ready. He then left them to cool down and took the scarlet-red pots out and poured the rest of the green liquid over them. Each red pot had one green pot emptied over it. Then William waited for 5 minutes for the mix to slowly and partially solidify before taking it over the anvil. Can I use your help again? As he saw how efficiently Alina worked, he didn't shy from being shameless and asked her for help. She started to help again. In the span of the next couple hours, she completed the task. Every time she finished cleansing, William would come and take the final mix and pour it on the mold. 20 flying knives were produced like this. Before he would give any mix to Alina, he would drop a few of his blood over it to establish a blood link with these knives. As for the time she kept hammering, he started to get busy assembling the arrows. Using drops of blood to link these arrows to him, he made sure to establish a weaker form of link with them as well. Flying arrows would consume a lot of his spirit power if he insisted on doing it the same way as the flying knives. But the way he did it allowed him to just exert a little control over the arrows while being airborne. This might decrease the amount of consumption, and also help him exert a little control to change the direction slightly. Thanks. After finishing all that, William saw that this trip to the forging department was worth his time and effort. He didn't feel any regret about losing much time here. He not only made what he wanted, he also gained a good sword, better than what he expected. Say hello to your master for me. Alina stood at the doors of the academy leading to the forest. She insisted on accompanying him this far, and William wouldn't miss the chance. After all, he was worried about Guanin and his gang. What if they stopped him and tried to cause trouble again inside the academy? Not to mention Barry's clan would look for him if they noticed his little lie from earlier. Sure, William nodded with a big smile that didn't make Alina satisfied. Next time we meet we'll work on our deal, Alina reminded him, stressing over this point again. I'll take care of things inside the forging department for you and your master. Just make sure the esteemed master will agree. She will, William firmly said. After all, there was no master, and he was the one holding the final say here. If this deal was done properly, then William would solve a big part of his financial problems. He might not face any big obstacles for now. But once his spirit power started to climb higher, he would definitely need a ton of resources. And any resource in the spirit world would cost lots of spirit crystals. So securing this deal early on was a good piece of news for him. Despite it not being enough, it would buy him more time to find more sources of profit to his pockets. As he stepped into the forest, his attention became focused on two things. First, he needed to get inside the deeper zones of the forest, the area he wasn't any familiar with. And second, he had to solve his mud spirit phase issue. Despite having the godly devouring ability of the nine-tailed fox, this would only help his spirit power and physical strength. Yet his spirit was still immature. Pushing his spirit power further without having a good foundation was a common mistake he wouldn't commit. BL.net, to elevate my spirit, I need to select carefully which monster I should merge with, he muttered to himself while tons of information flooded his mind. Having a mud spirit wasn't a big deal. In the outside world most of the spirit masters were born like him. It was the same case here as well. But what made a big difference in the outside world was the simple and yet game-changing concept of spirit purity. Anyone had a chance to upgrade his spirit from the mud phase all the way to the top grade spirit ranks. Mud phase might be considered the bottom line of any spirit master. Some might be blessed enough and born with higher spirit grades like Barry. Those were the ones who were considered spirit masters in this current world of his. But William knew better. Mud phase might be called phase 0 of any spirit master where spirit power would range below 30. Chapter 27 for Messi, the World Cup champion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Above the spirit mud phase there was the spirit formation phase, spirit foundation phase, spirit expansion phase, spirit strengthening phase, spirit enhancement phase, spirit evolution phase, spirit purification phase, spirit advancement phase, spirit phantom phase, and the last legendary phase, the spirit ascension phase. Even the ones considered geniuses in this world would mostly be at the spirit foundation phase. With each upgrade in spirit power level, the spirit would get enhanced as well and enter a higher stage. But if things were left to this, then the end phase any spirit master in this world could reach was only limited to spirit enhancement or even at best spirit evolution phase. To be able to ascend higher than his past life strength, he needed to reach higher phases. If he wanted a chance against that nine-tailed fox, he had to reach at least the spirit advancement phase. But raising one's spirit grade technique wasn't a big deal for him. The main problem laid in the path he would select. Once the spirit master selected the path of his future spirit form, he wouldn't be able to easily change it. Even those born with spirits like Barry, they still had a chance to modify it all the way to the top. But the choices would be limited by the innate spirit they were born with. Despite that, spirit masters here would consider mud-phased spirit masters weak and failures. But William knew in the outside world they were considered lucky. They got all the paths open for their spirits to develop, not limited by their inherited spirits. People like Barry would be limited in comparison. For example, she had a twin spirit, and even with that she couldn't merge with earth-based or even water or ice-based monster spirits. Her two spirits were fire-based ones. The earth-based monster spirits would hinder the berserk and brutal nature of her fiery spirits. And about the water or ice-based monster spirits, it was common knowledge how the two reacted with fire. The only choices for her would be limited to fire, light, darkness, and thunder-based monster spirits. One had to know that fire-based monster spirits were commonly found, but the other types were like gold found in mud. They were rare, extremely valuable and very difficult to kill. When talking about Barry as an example, even with how common fire monsters were, not all of them were suitable for her. After all, she had double high-end fire-based spirits within her. Low-level or even mediocre-level fiery monster spirits wouldn't give her anything worth of value. Her options would be limited to the mid and top-grade fiery monster spirits. And those types were harder to find, and much harder to kill. So sometimes, blessing might come as a curse, and vice versa. As for William, he didn't consider fire-based monster spirits for now. If he had to choose, then he would aim for those rare spirits, thunder, light, and darkness for example. Selecting the first spirit monster to integrate with wasn't a simple decision to make. It was much better for William to select a rare type-based monster spirit than common ones. The base spirit he'd merge with would determine lots of things later on. If he limited himself to fire, water, or earth-based monster spirits, he'd face much difficulties later on. Selecting a rare monster spirit was better as they weren't just rare, they were also flexible and overbearing against common monster spirits. If he selected light-based monster spirit for example as the base spirit of his, he could add fire, water, ice, earth, and even wind-based monster spirits later on without worrying about any conflicts between these spirits. The nine-tailed fox had a darkness-based spirit, one that helped him create his legend. It was also one of the reasons behind his superiority above most enemies he faced. Even William lost thanks partially to this difference in spirit quality. So, when considering what type his spirit would be, he couldn't help but crave for light or lightning. Light was the nemesis of dark-based spirits. And lightning had a useful purification effect against darkness as well. He was planning for his battle of revenge against that damn fox in the far-fetched future, even if he was in such a weak state of power right now. But hoping was something, and really getting one of these two spirits was another. William's own experience about this forest from past life was limited to the outer region only. He ventured deeper only on a single occasion, when he was running for his life when the world was falling apart. Inside the outer region, he was sure there were no single light-based or lightning-based spirit monsters at all. These monsters would be considered tyrannical. However, even if he didn't know the inner region of the forest, he still heard stories from disciples about their adventures there. He heard about the presence of few light and lightning-based monsters at some deep regions of this forest. But he never saw a detailed map about the deeper zones of the forest before ever in past life. Even if he knew about these locations, getting there was a trouble in itself. In addition to that, and by his current strength, he wouldn't stand a chance against any brutal monster of them. One had to know that both types of monsters were famous for their insane speed and devastating attack power. Even if he was extremely lucky to find a white-grade monster of either two spirits, William wouldn't be able to contend against it with his current strength. I need to raise my spirit power first, he came to this conclusion and so he didn't hurry to venture into the deeper parts of the forest. His aim for now was to hunt more monkeys and weaker monsters using the same method he used before. After staying in the outer region of the forest for an entire day, William finally killed thousands of these monsters and devoured their cores. His spirit power now was 50.6. He got an increase of 20.1 spirit points during a single day. Even so, he wasn't satisfied. As I thought, after devouring the last batch of monkey cores, he stood and muttered to himself, the higher my spirit power climbs, the weaker the effects of these cores will be. He was now sure that he could absorb cores of monsters he'd kill. He killed a few other types of monsters aside from the monkeys, and he was able to absorb their cores as well. At the last few batches, he devoured over 1,000 cores and yet only gained 5 spirit points only. His rising speed was affected now by his increased spirit power. I can't keep going on like this. As he reached this conclusion, he decided to exit the safe outer forest region and risk entering deeply inside. The issue wasn't only for increasing his spirit power, but about his mud-phased spirit. He needed to elevate it before hitting the 70-point mark. Doing so would help him in increasing his spirit power faster. Also, he would be able to use his spirit during the fight, which would be a significant boost to his strength. William started to walk deeper in the forest, while trying to be cautious when he reached areas he didn't recognize. He took out his sword and hung it over his waist, took out his bow and made an arrow always at the string. He was ready at any moment to welcome a fight once a monster would appear in front of him. The bow wasn't as great as his sword, but it was still useful. Its main effect was to slightly boost speed and make the arrows move faster. Yet it didn't boost his strength or the power of arrows themselves. William knew if the bow had either of these two effects, then it would be considered a silver or even a gold-grade weapon instead. He checked his gold sword before. It didn't only have a sharpness boost, but it also boosted strength and agility. Just moving it around created a series of afterimages behind. And William was sure even if he fought a dark gold monster with it, the sharpness and strength boosted by the sword would leave behind a deep wound at such a monster. Tick. Chapter 28 Fight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tick, it was a faint sound, but the all-cautious William managed to detect it. He already walked through the deeper parts of the forest for half a day. Encountering many monsters that were mostly bronze-grade and few silver-grade made his guard always raised. But he didn't try to kill any monster. He wanted to first locate the one he needed. Even if he couldn't kill it, he would assess its strength and abilities and then retreat fast before getting killed. He didn't have it all nice at all. He had to run for his life a few times and was this close from using his weapons a couple of times already. He didn't dare to start a fight as he feared the sound of battle and smell of blood would attract more monsters. He didn't want monsters to flood his path, or else he'd end up dying no matter how he tried. Not to mention he didn't know the terrain here. So, if things went wrong, he'd not be able to run away in time. He might even run into more monsters while trying to escape. In brief, he decided to evade all monsters until he'd face something he'd be forced to fight, or he'd find his target. As he heard that subtle sound, he ducked on the ground and protected himself by the long weeds around like he used to do every time he met a monster. Darkness already prevailed in the world, but this didn't stop William. He used his ears to locate the monster and get more information about it. From the pattern of its moves, it must be an agility-based monster. He assessed the monster by the places it emitted sound from. The monster seemed to notice William, as it was moving in a wide circle surrounding him. Trying to get me when I'm unprepared. A cunning monster indeed. Monsters in bronze grade held a little level of intelligence. But it was enough for them to gauge their targets. They might not be this easy to kill thanks to their high alert and ability to assess the strength of their foes. But this monster felt different. It showed the intelligence of silver-grade monsters. If not being near the outer zone of the forest, William might mistake it for being a higher-grade monster. Will it be the one I'm looking for? Thinking about that raised the level of excitement in his heart. William met silver monsters before, but they were all unsuitable for him. And he ended up disappointed many times already. As he waited, the sounds kept getting closer. Being impatient already. That's a normal thing for such a silver-grade monster like you, he inwardly sneered while tightening the bow in his hand. The bow was a totally curved one, made out of red wood and supported with a few thin plates of light ores. William closed his eyes and focused entirely and listened attentively to that monster's moves. He would never underestimate a bronze-grade monster, not to mention a silver one like this dude here. If he couldn't escape at the right moment, he'd use his arrows to buy himself time before finding a way out. He was worried about the agility of this monster. Speed-blessed monsters were this hard to shake off, and he was lucky to not meet something like that except this time. In time the monster got closer to him, he already figured out its moving pattern. It was jumping from a spot to another 10 meters away, always in curves and not straight lines. The monster seemed to have feathers that emitted subtle noises while moving. William knew a lot of monsters like this, so he needed to first see his target before deciding its kind. Without the need to say, he knew he couldn't run away this time without a fight. From the speed that monster showed, William knew he'd be outrun if he depended solely on his legs to run away. The monster was this fast and it was just trying to surround him. If a battle erupted, then that monster would show a higher level of speed. William started to ready himself for this battle. He was fortunate enough to evade fighting for half a day already. But his luck seemed to run thin at this moment. He hoped it'd be one of the two types of monsters he was looking for. Even if he ended up killing it and it wasn't suitable, he would just absorb its core and raise his spirit power. As for the smell of blood, he'd have to run away fast enough and pray the battle here wouldn't attract many monsters. Got you. Once the monster became closer than 50 meters, William didn't wait any longer. His bow could release arrows for 100-meter distance at least. So, he still had a buffer zone to hit that monster before running away. Whoosh. Just as he released his arrow, he stood up, opened his eyes wide, and a candle of light was thrown the next moment. The arrow traveled fast, and it seemed to startle the monster as it didn't expect its prey to fight back. Roar. This time it was a unique thunderous roar. William didn't even need the help of the green light of the candle to determine this monster's kind. The Nightfall Lightning Fox. Damn. I ended up meeting such a relative to you, old fox. Instead of panicking, William was laughing in pure excitement. His prayers were answered this time, as that fox was just perfect for his needs. This monster hailed from the Fox clan, but it came as a variation between foxes and lightning birds. So, it was normal to have feathers on its body, a mix between dark and lightning spirits. Instead of the small physique known for foxes, this one was more like a cheetah. William looked at his foe while the arrow he released just flew fast towards it. But with such a roar, a strange light emitted from its mouth, dazzling to the eye, pure milky white in color. In an instant it slammed against the arrow, smashing it into pieces. Not going to fall easily, aren't you? Despite this coming as a surprise to William, he instantly reacted. That attack from the fox monster wasn't just aimed to stop his arrow, but it also covered the remaining distance and went towards him as well. Such a monster showed another variation. That attack seemed to carry the element of lightning and light, making that fox monster a hybrid-type monster. Hybrid monsters were strong and vicious, which explained why it showed such intelligence while being only silver grade. Whoosh, whoosh. This time William demonstrated his vast fighting experience. That monster wasn't the only one with quick reflexes, William also was. The moment that light attack appeared, William jumped to the side instantly to evade it. At the same time, he took out 2 arrows and released them in succession, one towards the monster, and the other to the left side of it. Roar. Another light attack fell and the arrow heading directly towards the monster got destroyed. As for the other arrow, the monster didn't give it any heed. It seemed the monster mistook William's actions for his attempt to close any escape route on it. Or just a preemptive move from William, future reading its next moves and aiming at that spot it would jump at next. But it underestimated William. Boom, using the weak spirit connection with that arrow, William diverted its course at the last moment. The arrow strangely arched midair before slamming heavily on the unprepared monster. Then a loud explosion occurred. The efforts of William weren't wasted. Just from the size of the exploding fireball, William knew if this monster wasn't killed, then it would be heavily injured. Chapter 29 The Nightfall Lightning Fox. You are listening at novelfull.audio. William made his arrows to deal perfectly well with silver-grade monsters. Even if this was a mix between two species of monsters, and also a hybrid, William doubted it would emerge unscathed from his arrows. But the next moment, William had to jump again to evade another light attack combined with a mighty roar from the monster. Still not enough to take you down then. William felt pain in the roaring of the monster, yet he didn't feel any sign of weakness. It was apparent that his arrow didn't inflict the expected damage for reasons he could guess. Without waiting for the cloud of fire, smoke, and dust to be cleared, he instantly took out 3 arrows and released them in 3 different directions. Roar! The monster attacked again. This time he didn't ignore any of William's arrows. It learnt its lesson from a painful past experience and made sure to attack the 3 arrows at the same time. And with each attack, it kept roaring in loud and annoying way that got on William's nerves. Shut the hell up. You are going to wake the entire forest, God damn it. The roars were so loud, even louder than the explosions of his arrows. There was a lightning effect in these roars, but that didn't affect William greatly. Lightning would add a numbing and even paralyzing effect to any attack even if it was a sound-based one. And as the monster used a sound-based attack like this, it wanted to meddle with his mind and will. Yet this didn't put William under much pressure. After all, William's own will wasn't of an 8-year-old kid. Trying to affect his mind and movement using such useless weak lightning wasn't enough. If the monster used a direct hit combined with lightning like that light bolt attacks, then William would be in danger by then. Whoosh, asterisk whoosh. Asterisk whoosh asterisk. Like last time, William released 3 arrows before he threw something afterwards. The monster attacked the arrows like before, but this time there was another thing hidden behind them. Roar. It was a much painful roar this time, and it told William that that monster got severely wounded by his knife. What William threw after his arrows was one of his flying knives. Even if the monster could smash his arrows, he couldn't affect the totally under his control knife. And William was sure his knives were much stronger than the arrows. Roar! But this was only the beginning of hell for this monster. William didn't only send 4 more knives to attack it, he also controlled the knives once they got into that monster's body and made them move deeper in its flesh. The more they moved, the weaker the roars of the monster became. Die in peace and silence. As the monster became much weaker, William didn't depend on such a slow way to kill it. He wasn't a sadist to begin with. So he sent 3 arrows in succession, killing that monster in the middle of 3 mighty explosions. The monster issued its last roar before it fell with its big body. During this flashing battle that didn't last more than half a minute, William couldn't clearly see its body. But once the monster died, he made sure of his earlier guesses. Once he started to examine the fox's body, he was sure this wasn't a simple nightfall lightning fox. There was a strange long bone stretching all the way from its neck to its thick furred long tail. That bone was bright silver in color, meaning it was one of the best places in its body brimming with spirit power. One had to know that silver-grade monsters could give more materials than white or bronze-grade ones. William placed his hand on that bone and felt its smooth and slightly soft contour. So, you are a hybrid with an interesting light element, he muttered in low tone as this was the first time ever for him to see such a monster. I guess it's my lucky day. I didn't only get one of the elements like I hoped for, but 3 at once. Thanks buddy, I appreciate your help. It got dark, lightning and a light element. It was just awesome and perfect for William. Unlike before, he didn't hurry to dissect this monster at the spot to claim his loot. Instead, he started to grab its huge body to a safer place, a slight cave covered by thick bushes he found a mile away. William was sure this battle must have attracted the attention of many monsters around. Even if he tried his best to finish it fast, just the sounds of explosions from his arrows and the noisy roars of that monster were enough to attract many eyes here. Not to mention the smell of blood would attract more in the next few hours. But he got a solution already for the problem of blood smell. As William knew evading battles here was nearly impossible, he made preparations to solve the most important problem of any battle, the smell of blood. As he knew he had to fight eventually, he kept looking for perfect hide spots everywhere he went to. And that just came handy at this moment, or else he'd have to look for a suitable place to hide and absorb the monster's spirit, wasting precious time in the process and putting himself into danger. The body of this monster was really heavy. It spanned for 5 meters in length and almost 1.5 meters in width. The variation it got by that light element bone made it a little heavier than William initially thought. But that didn't stop William from moving the carcass. If William waited for a few more minutes there, he was sure he'd end up fighting more monsters. William moved towards that cave which he met just before meeting the fox monster. It was the safest place he could think of around this region, the only safe place he met close to the battlefield. Once moved there, he started first to scatter the powder he got from crushing roots of certain plants he picked along the way. This will help mask that heavy blood smell. He shook his hand off the powder after finishing covering the entire cave area and the closest part of the path he took to come here. Then he went inside and placed the heavy body of that fox in the end of this cave. The process of absorbing monster spirit wasn't short or simple. Besides, any interruption in the middle of it would end with a failure and a big backlash. So, William took his time to close the opening of that cave with more plants and roots. He even used some dirt. He didn't want anything to interrupt him during the process. This cave was underneath the roots of a big, towering tree. The tree itself needed a group of 10 people together to surround it. But it was situated on the edge of a slope, and the cave lay just in that spot with a narrow hole appearing from outside. The small opening led into a slightly spacious cave. It wasn't that wide, but compared to his cabinet, it certainly was big enough. "Time to get myself a good spirit," he said while eyeing the monster he killed with eyes filled with greed and much anticipation. He sat beside the dead body of the monster and didn't even light a single candle. It was still dark outside, and light could be noticed easily by monsters. He closed the opening, but he doubted what he did was enough to block the light of the candle. If monsters from outside noticed the light here, then he'd get interrupted while absorbing the spirit of that fox monster. Lying in such darkness, he felt the body of that monster before reopening the old wound on his left hand. He felt weird, as he started to feel his left hand turning into his blood donor in this life. Doom doom, doom, like a heart beating, once his bloody hand touched the monster, the entire body of that dead fox started to emit a faint myriad of different lights. William wasn't startled by this. After all, this was an expected result. The way to absorb any monster spirit depended entirely on using Spirit Master's blood in the process. And William already got the unbelievable devouring ability. So, he expected a much fiercer reaction and even few changes to the process he was familiar with. He didn't remove his hand or even stop the bleeding. Instead, he pressured with his hand further while making sure there was no gap between the two. The more beating it came, the more changes happened to his blood and to the monster's body. The blood started to move, coalescing together and forming a unified blanket of white material. It was a manifestation of his current spirit. It wasn't pure white, but white that was mixed with many impurities, turning it slightly darker and less appealing to the eye. As for the monster's body, it started to turn translucent under his bloody touch. All the places covered showed its internal organs, bones, until a thin wisp of fog appeared deep in the center of that body. This was the monster's spirit, the one William aimed to absorb and merge with at the moment. Chapter 30 Waking Up After 4 Days. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That wisp of smoke was silver in color, expressing the grade of this monster. William didn't hurry to absorb it as he first waited for his blood to entirely cover the monster's body before making his move. All he did was to think about sucking this wisp, and the wisp moved. Like being attracted by a hidden force, that smoke moved inside William's body. Then everything went blank in his eyes while William entered a state of trance. That wisp of silver smoke started to melt slowly and merge with his spirit. William stayed in such a state for a longer time than he predicted. He imagined it would take roughly half a day at most. But it took far longer than that. For 4 consecutive days, William remained in his position while his spirit kept absorbing the spirit of the monster. Crack, just staying like this for a long time left a stiffening effect on his weak body. The moment he moved, his body issued cracking sounds before opening his eyes. A flash of silver light passed there, before it instantly vanished. William looked around and couldn't help but feel strange when he noticed the faint layer of dust on his body. Did I take a whole day here or what? He wasn't aware of the time he spent here. He focused solely on the merging process, but from the bright world outside he could tell it was already daytime. Let's see what changed. As he finished this merge, he didn't even try to eat or drink something. He took out a spirit crystal and one of the candles before he started assessing his power. The moment he injected his spirit power inside the crystal, the entire crystal shone in bright silver light. I passed the spirit formation stage and entered the spirit foundation one. That's great. He expected this fox's spirit to just bring his own outside the mud phase into the spirit formation stage. But now that silver light was a trademark for the spirit foundation stage. For a spirit to be in the mud phase, it wouldn't show any shape at all. At spirit formation stage, the spirit would show a faint shape of the monster it belonged to. Just like Barry's case, her spirit power took the form of a phoenix and a dragon. So, she was in the spirit formation stage. In the spirit foundation stage, the spirit would start to show small circular movement around, taking what could be said as pillar bases in the spirit. And even before his spirit could take a full form, he noticed the presence of these pillar bases in his spirit. As the light stabilized, William started to inspect the crystal. What he saw made his jaw drop without knowing if he should laugh or not. I didn't imagine I even took that bastard spirit away. Just inside the crystal, a small version of a fox with 2 tails appeared. The fox was smaller in size, with faint silver fur covering its body. William knew it wasn't like the fox he killed and absorbed its spirit. If so, then that monster only had 1 tail, not 2. Not to mention the difference in the shape and color of the fur. The monster he killed had feathers and not fur. No matter how William saw it, it was a miniature version of the 9-tailed fox he fought before dying and coming here. There is that backbone extending over its back, so it can be considered as a mixture between the 2 foxes or what? William muttered to himself while closely inspecting that fox spirit he had. But aside from that backbone, everything else was just similar to the old enemy of his. 2 tails. Never imagined that damned fox had to gain its tails by advancing his spirit grade. This was a new knowledge he didn't know about his enemy. Gaining 2 tails was linked to having achieved the spirit foundation stage, which was considered phase 2 in the spirit evolution path. Thinking like that matched the 9 tails that fox had when William fought him. That fox was in the 9th spirit stage, which was trying to ascend to the legendary 10th stage and be a god. When William thought about it, he couldn't help but feel a bit weird. It was a very simple conclusion, yet neither anyone managed to link things together before. So, I got your devouring ability plus your spirit, he. I can't imagine the look on your face if you ever heard about that. William was satisfied by this. He knew such a result happened because he accidentally absorbed the spirit of a monster related to that damn fox. Or else his fox spirit wouldn't have grown into such a state. He realized now he ascended 2 stages directly thanks to such coincidence. And that made him grin evilly. Then he started to count the spirit power spots inside the crystals. 80 points. I gained almost 30 points in just 1 day. Wow. He didn't know he was here for 4 days. But even if he knew, gaining such an increase in the span of 4 days was already something good. He gained such an increase thanks to the little modification the method to raise one's spirit experienced in his body. His devouring ability made sure to absorb spirit power from that fox's core, adding 30 points to his tally. In usual times, few points would be added to one spirit power count, no more than 10 points. But others didn't have his heaven-defying devouring ability, which enabled him to get more spirit power. But the good news ended here. When he sought the dead monster body for its core, he was disappointed to find nothing there. Did I consume it while absorbing its spirit? Was it the reason behind my spirit power increase? He frowned, but the facts were there in front of his eyes.